Hello everybody, this is TipTop MTG here today with another Magic the Gathering video. In today's video, I'm going to be doing something really fun. So every Sunday I post a video relating to custom Magic the Gathering cards, whether it's talking about a really awesome Marvel set or reviewing custom cards. But occasionally I do this fun game where I generate 3 random verbs, adjectives, or nouns and try to turn them into Magic the Gathering mechanics. So let me give you an example. Here we have random verbs. We have a promote, open, and sentence. So what I would do is I'd pick one of those verbs and I would turn it into a mechanic. So maybe I'd do promote, and the mechanic is essentially you put promotion counters on something, and then you have cards that care about how many times something has been promoted. So maybe each creature you control gets +1/+1 for each time it's been promoted, and then you have another creature that says tap target creature you control that's been promoted 3 times, you draw a card. There are lots of different things you could do there, but that's the general idea. So why don't we generate our first set of 3? Starting off, we have balance, intend, deposit. So, okay, going through my thought process, balance. There is a card called balance, I believe, and maybe we can do something along the lines of an effect that changes based on your opponent. So, you gain balance, and then it's kind of like undergrowth, where it's a descriptor, where it's like balance, line, you gain 1 life for each creature, like, I don't know, you do something based on the number of creatures your opponent has in comparison to you. Intend, I honestly have no ideas for that. And deposit, maybe you can put some sort of counter on something, like you can dump a bunch of mana onto it, and then you can get it back later. So maybe that's like a deposit. So why don't we see what I can do with balance? So for this one, I think an example will work better. Alright, so here's my first kind of, thought on it. So it's balance. When card enters the battlefield, you gain X life, where X is the number of creatures your opponents control minus the number of creatures you control. So that's one idea, right? Why don't I do another one? Here's another one. Balance. When card enters the battlefield, you gain life equal to the difference among creatures between you and target opponent. And that creatures could be lands, it could be artifacts, it could be enchantments. Now, what's different here is that even if you have more creatures, you're still going to get the effect. The difference is you just don't want to be close, and I don't know if that's really a good idea for mechanics. So I'm going to try one last thing. Alright, so here's kind of what I came up with. So another example could be like on a spell, balance all creatures. Each player chooses a number of creatures he or she controls equal to the number of creatures controlled by the player who controls the fewest, which is exactly how they word it on balance. So I thought, that's how they would do it. Then sacrifices the rest. So, in the first one, it's kind of a descriptor of, and it wouldn't obviously always be gaining life. It'd be doing different effects, draw cards, whatever. I just don't think that really has enough, space to be a mechanic, and neither does really the second one. However, it does, it is interesting. It's kind of like counter target spell. It's kind of something you just see on an occasional card here and there. So next, deposit. I want to also try and, do this one. So why don't we try that? Alright, so here's kind of what I made. I wanted to do a whole card, not just a line of text that would be on a card. So we have a creature, it's a bear or whatever. I don't know why there's a blue bear. Maybe it's a polar bear. Whatever. It says when it deposits, you may scry 1. So it's similar to escape. Like when it escapes, do this. But then you can pay 2 mana and deposit 1. Now, obviously, this would have to be balanced in some way. Maybe you can only do it once per turn, whatever. And then it says, put 1 deposit counter on card. You may remove this counter at any time to add colorless. So, you're kind of just throwing your mana in, and it's inefficient. You are paying 2 to put 1, but it allows you to store up for a big turn. You also are risking the fact that this creature could be blown up and then you lose all that mana. But then also whenever you deposit something, you get to scry 1. So it's, just a little bonus added on top. So I think that's what deposit would be. Okay, so we're going to do one more set of verbs. We have search, sound, and start. So, we kind of already have search in terms of like search your library. So I don't think that's really going to work out well. Sound and start. Oh, they all start with S's. Interesting. Okay, so search, I don't know. That'd be very difficult to do because search is already a word used in Magic a lot. Sound, maybe sound in the word time, like sound an alarm. But then start. Start could be something on an artifact. Why don't we, I'm going to do that. Okay, yeah, start. Let's do it. So we have start. Here's what I'm thinking. And I'm going to do a full artifact. So it's going to be... Alright, so here's kind of what I have. So we have an artifact that would maybe cost 3, it doesn't really matter, but as long as card is started, whenever a creature attacks you, you may draw a card, and then it has the ability start for 3 in a blue. So then card becomes started until the beginning of your next turn. So it's kind of like you have to like start up the artifact for it to do anything. So you could put a more powerful ability on a cheaper artifact, but you have to be constantly throwing mana or sacrificing creatures or, I don't know, tapping it. Maybe when it's tapped, it does one thing. When it's not tapped, it does another. I don't know. There's a lot of interesting things you could do with this. I actually think this has a lot of design space. I don't know if start is really the word you want to use, but, you know, this I think works. It may be a little bit difficult to remember, so maybe you put like a start counter on it or something, but I think that this is fine. Yeah, I actually really like this. So why don't we move into adjectives? So these are going to be closer to things like menace or, you know, vigilance instead of a word or an action. I'm going to do, okay, so inquisitive, I really don't think I could do. Several, I really don't think I could do. But popular, I might be able to do something with that. So let's try it. Alright, so here's one. Popular. This creature must be targeted by spells and abilities your opponents control of Fable. So if you cast a shock, it has to go at this creature, which may not seem very popular, but it's the target of all this attention, kind of. So that's kind of my idea there. It also, you know, you could also make it affect you, but I think it's interesting to think like, oh, you want to win by casting Banefire for X equals 7 billion? Well, now you got to target this thing first. It's almost like taunt, but not taunt. What am I'm thinking, like, I don't know where that came from. It's almost like, you know, having to be blocked or something, having to attack. I don't know. I don't know if there's a really good comparison here, but it's kind of like having a creature. Yeah. It's kind of like having a creature to defend you from spells. Now, if a spell only targets players, well, then this isn't going to do anything. And also if it has multiple targets, only one of the targets has to be this thing. So I think this is an interesting mechanic. It could be another, let's see if I can do something else with it. Alright, so here was another thing I came up with. I also, you know, messed around with a few other original, but popular. This creature gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control. So the idea here is that, you know, everyone wants to be around them and they get, you know, they feel more confident and better. I don't know. I think I prefer the other one. The other one creates this interesting dynamic of kind of a layer and a shield for you against effects like that. So I think it's very cool. Also, yeah, I just think the first one's better, but the second one is also an option. We have whimsical, worried, soft. So, okay, I have one for worried. Alright, so here's what I have. Worried. When a player casts a spell that has a target, you may pay 1. If you don't, return this permanent to its owner's hand. So, basically, and obviously that pay 1 could be like this. It could be worried 1, so it could be worried 2, and now you have to pay 2 for every spell that has a target. And so the idea here is that this creature is so like skitterish, and I don't know if that's the right word to use, but you know, they worry about everything. So, you know, you're going to target something, even if it's not being targeted, it wants to go back to your hand, but you have to motivate it to stay down by using mana. So what this means is that your opponents, while yes, this can also be a good thing, if they target whatever this worried creature is, you can just bounce it back to your hand. But they can also use it to bounce it back to your hand when you don't want to bounce it by targeting other things, like, oh, I could kill this thing, or you're tapped out, I can target one of your other creatures with a kill spell, I kill that creature, bounce that one back to your hand. So this can both work for you and against you, and I think it actually works pretty well. Alright, so why don't we jump right over to nouns. Now, nouns are the hardest because you either have to take the noun as not a noun, or it has to be some bigger idea for a mechanic. You know, sometimes I have to mess with it a little bit, like perspective, I think was one of the ones that I got before. And instead of it being like a mechanic just called perspective, it was like swap 2 players' perspectives. So this one is going to be a little bit more of a stretch, but I think it'll be interesting. Alright, so our 3 nouns are problem, consequence, football. This is interesting. Problem, I don't think you could really do unless it was some huge mechanic where it was like problem, then a dash, and then some sort of requirement, and you have to be able to fulfill that requirement by the next time your upkeep happens. And if you don't do that, you get sacrificed or something. That could be something kind of interesting, but I don't know if that really fits well with problem. Consequence, that could be a very generic term for whenever an opponent targets your creature. Yeah, why don't we do that? Okay, here's a very basic look at it. Consequence, whenever this creature is targeted by a spell or ability your opponents control, you may draw a card. So that first part, up until the comma, would be standard on every single consequence card. But the after that could be different for every single card. So that's one way, we could do that. I think it's kind of boring, but I think that I could see them doing it if adamant was a mechanic. This doesn't seem that far off. But I kind of want to build problem because I kind of came up with a cool idea for that. So why don't we do that? All right, so problem. Here's my basic idea. So, and it would need to be rewarded. This is just me trying to generally get my thoughts down. 3 creatures you don't control have died. At the beginning of your upkeep, if this permanent doesn't have a solution counter on it, sacrifice it unless its problem condition has been met since this permanent has entered the battlefield. If you don't sacrifice it, put a solution counter on it. So it's going to say, hey, do I have a solution counter on me? No. Okay, let's see. Have 3 creatures I don't the player doesn't control died since I've entered the battlefield? Yes. Okay, put a solution counter. No. Okay, sacrifice it. And this could be as simple as to draw 3 cards. So has this person drawn 3 cards since this thing has entered the battlefield? And what this is this is only a downside. So you'd put this on a creature. Maybe you'd put it on a 2-cost 5/5 that you can't actually keep unless you can jump through some hoops. This is kind of just giving you some hoops to jump through. Alrighty guys, that's been it for this video. I want to know what you guys would have done for some of these. First off, if you want to do one that I didn't pick, feel free, let me know what you guys would do. Also, if you want to do one I did pick, also you can do that. It's pretty awesome, and it's also really fun. As well, if you want to challenge me, put a word in the comments down below. Also, probably write something with it, not just a random word. But then I will get back to you and see if I can come up with a mechanic for it. Alrighty guys, if you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.